Young Justice issue 16, Brian Michael Bendis writing, and David F. Walker as well, with Scott Goluski on the art. This is Bart Allen given as an exposition dump as to
not what I thought it was going to be, given how the last issue ended.
Yeah.
About Bart's adventures through the multiverse, when really his journey isn't much different than Connor's, where he was fighting Mirror Master when whatever happened with Rebirth happened. And he's gone through some of these different ones looking for his friends, realizing that where he came from no longer exists, and they're kind of exiles. So I guess that's more on me than it is on the team at play, because I thought this was going to be Bart finding out some things about the multiverse and kind of what's going on.
I don't think it is on you. I think this is anticlimactic. Yeah? I feel like, you know, the tease last week was okay, because Connor's story was okay. This explained everything, but it wasn't like super exciting. He's been hiding in Gem World for whatever years, you know.
Right.
So the tease last week where he's like, oh wait, you never actually explained where you came from, like how where have you been all this time? What's going on with you, Bart? And it being like, you know, this big tease for the next issue, it's kind of like, okay, we're going to finally get some really juicy stuff about how Rebirth affected Bart and why he's around and so on. And this issue, you know, it was like a random fight with Connor and this monster from Star Labs, and
that was pretty fun.
Yeah,
like, because the monster, you know, it explains itself, but it still just wants to eat people. You know, so you think you're going one way, and it's like, oh no, he's misunderstood. No, but he still wants to eat people. So I thought that was a nice, fun break. But I will say I did like how Bendis and Walker dealt with Bart's trauma and all this, in that the reason he keeps moving is so he doesn't have to stop and think about things. And that's such an impulse thing, right? Like from all the impulse that I've read in Bart Allen, is he's moving faster than his brain because he doesn't want to deal with reality. Because, I mean, this was a guy that was raised in virtual reality. And they touch on it here that he doesn't even know how old he is because of his hypermetabolism. He could be 2, he could be 19, he could be 34, right? But because of all the flash time travel-y aspects and multiverse stuff at play, he's kind of lost track, and that's really hit him, you know? And he just keeps jumping around so he doesn't have to think about it. So I did like that, but I do feel like there was that bait and switch where, okay, we're going to get to the nitty gritty. So when we got to that, him saying like, oh, well, I went to this other reality, and I'm like, well, this is just more of what Connor went through. This is not really different.
I think it's not just that. I was already kind of sick of the multiverse hopping stuff in this book from before. So him thinking he's went to a just another Earth, or he's in between universes and whatever. Like, and then especially since it didn't even necessarily feel like he was in a different Earth at a certain point. You know, it felt like he just went to the future, and it was like, okay, the Young Justice all died heroically at some point, and it's a mystery where they went or what happened to them.
Yep.
And okay, maybe that's what the story's going to be now. It's going to be about the Young Justice trying to like figure out why this has happened. And it kind of ends in a similar way where once Tim shows up to talk to the two of them at the campfire, they're like, okay, let's go to the Hall of Justice and talk to the Justice League about, you know, what happened to us. But yeah, he's in like this future where Bart's, you know, he's in an Arkham Asylum, and he's with like old woman Harley Quinn, who's you know,
whose hair still dyed.
Yeah, hair still dyed. She's still prodding at him, and you know, it feels like a nightmare scene rather than like an actual future. Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But he actually does escape because this is the same world, of course, that the Young Justice has died in, and he's asking questions. And he's trying to claim that he's Bart, and she's like, "Nah, they all went missing years ago. You can't be Bart." And he escapes. You know, he uses his super speed to get out, and he runs. And he basically says that as he was like jumping back and forth in time looking for Young Justice, that's how he ended up at the start of the book, where he ran into like, Tim and all that in Metropolis, and it's kind of underwhelming. I guess is the best way to put it. And I appreciate the focus. I appreciate that this issue focuses on really just I mean, Tim shows up eventually, but it's really just the two characters and mostly Bart. Yeah. And I really appreciate that because I think this book's been kind of lacking that, and maybe had a bit too many characters across the board every single issue. But I am very underwhelmed by what the actual reveals are and what the story is, and it still kind of feels wheel spinny in terms of there's not really a great answer to this. Like, it kind of felt like early on that Bendis had something to build to that kind of like tied it all in with why Young Justice is the way it is and how it all ties into Rebirth. And ultimately, it just kind of feels like it keeps coming up with more timelines and more stuff to make it confusing.
Yeah, I feel like he's just stringing us along now because, I mean, the first arc with Gemworld had, talks about 7 crises and all this different multiversal stuff, and it really set the bar high. And now we're just getting to the point where it's like, oh yeah, Rebirth happened, and we got lost. But I do like at the end where Drake shows up, and hopefully this is not another beat and switch where, we're just gonna get what happened with him and spoiler, because I really want to know what happened to them in between Tech and Young Justice, because they seem to know more than what's being let on.
I mean,
so
I'm less worried about that stuff because that's not going back to Rebirth. That's something that just happened between a story that we liked and where they are. So it feels like it's more of a personal thing. So I'm hoping that can pan out a bit better.
Yeah, I hope that's not multiversal stuff, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I hope what they find out has something to do with, I guess you'd have to go multiversal because you're involving Connor and Bart, but something that they uncovered that's going to explain like Steph finding out that some time ago she had a baby, right?
I feel like it's feeling more and more like you said, stringing along, and I kind of agree with that sentiment. Yeah. It kind of feels like fluff in a way where the book doesn't necessarily have a purpose, and it's just like we want a Young Justice book, so Bendis just keeps writing stories with these characters, and it feels like it's kind of directionless, or worse yet, it feels like it's pretending to have a direction but doesn't actually feel like it has one. And I think, looking at his work at DC so far, I think his Superman stuff has definitely had a direction. It's definitely had something to say. I think Naomi on its own was a really good story that spent time introducing this new character. And I think Legion and Young Justice are the ones that kind of feel a bit more like up in the air. And Legion's earlier on, so it's not in the same place yet where it feels as aimless. But I have a concern that it might get there where it feels like we want these things to exist so they exist, but they exist without much of a reason or real sort of I don't know, just like point, I guess.
Yeah, I know he has a Rip Hunter-esque board because this all makes sense to him. From his Superman to Young Justice to Legion with Naomi, they all kind of cross over at times, and I would just like more concrete with some of them, even in Legion, where I just feel like that's kind of gotten away from him. The fact that we're getting, I mean, as much as I love the gimmick of these one-page origins for each of the characters, that's a issue that we're losing for storytelling.
Honestly,
two issues, Matt.
2 issues.
2 issues.
The concept of like every page being like a different member of the Legion is the exact opposite of what I think that book needs to do.
Well, no, that's a great idea for an annual.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Or a guidebook kind of deal. But now we're getting away from storytelling that he wants to tell them. It's all well and fine that John's up there and it's like his college experience and whatnot, but to tell you the truth right now, I can't remember what happened in issue 6. I remember the Gold Lantern was there, and I remember that made it a hot book, and there's Monster Boy. But actually, what happened? I'm gonna have to.
I remember how. No, I remember.
Comes out.
I remember how it ended. It was Earth's water was coming back with the Trident. I remember the basic broad stroke of it.
Just on that there, Matt, you were like, oh yeah, okay, we're doing John's college years. It's kind of weird to do that when we didn't do the high school years, right?
Right. No, it's very much so.
It's a strange choice, and
he's being around the universe, and now he's up in space, and I don't know. I've been pretty positive on Bendis, but I definitely feel like those 2 books need a little bit more focus, and maybe he's doing like too much.
It's maybe not even Bendis's fault here, but the editorial, okay, we've been promising a Legion book for years at this point. We really need to do one. Bendis, do you want to take a crack at it? And he's just gone, I guess. But he didn't approach them with, I've got a great idea.
Oh, sure.
I feel the reverse for that for Young Justice versus Legion, because when he first started, the stack of books he was getting into, I remember he posted that picture. There was a ton of Legion stuff there. So I definitely feel like Legion's something that he had a passion for, and maybe it's gotten away. Whereas what you're saying about Legion, I would apply to Young Justice, where he's kind of like, hey, we have all these young heroes. You're pretty good with young heroes. You created Miles Morales. You want to? And he's like, sure.
It
You know.
it's kind of this weird thing where I love his Superman stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like Ramita's art aside in action,
Yeah.
and that one arc that we really didn't like Superman stuff's been great through and through. I think it's all had something to say. It's all had this great vision and focus to it. Whereas Young Justice, and to a lesser extent Legion, but Legion obviously is only 6 issues in, so I'll give it a bit more time to kind of find its feet. Uh, Young Justice though, like it feels like I keep getting like solid rompy issues without, and it keeps teasing the possibility of
Yep.
something that pulls it all together and makes it feel like it, because Bendis is at his best when there is like a focus and it feels like everything is kind of continuing on from each other.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like and I'm being very diplomatic with my wording here because I don't want it to just seem like I'm jumping on the hating on Bendis. I'm trying to be neutral here. You know, Pete, what you just described there is kind of what how we talk about the last arc and this current arc of Justice League, where it's like it's fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
But but Justice League knows it's just being a fun book. It's not pretending to be anything else, so you're okay with that. Whereas it sounds like Young Justice feels like if it just embraced being that fun thing, like fluffy fun, that you'd be more okay with it. But because it has this feeling of, oh no, there's going to be real deep meaning stuff. It's going to have ramifications that you've got these higher expectations on it.
Possibly. I mean, I think if they tried to do that with this, I'd still be frustrated because they do need to explain why these characters are here and how they're back and why they're this way. There's some weight to just doing this from the get go, regardless of what the book was trying to promise us, I suppose. But there's probably parts to that. There's probably definitely some of that in there. I don't know. It's just a little bit frustrating, and I'm hoping that it can turn around over time. But it's kind of like Bendis has his good books and his bad books, and I feel like this is feeling less like his Avengers and less like his Ultimate Spider-Man, whereas Superman does feel like maybe his running some of his better books, and this maybe feels more akin to. And I didn't read much of it, but this maybe feels more like his Guardians of the Galaxy, which existed because Bendis hadn't done Guardians of the Galaxy yet, but it isn't ultimately that important or anyone cares about it.
I mean, and that ultimately tied in with his X-Men run, which this kind of feels the same for, where there's a lot of these big ideas, but you just keep getting strung along to ultimately, that the whole Young X-Men story just kind of resolved itself in some way.
I liked his X-Men stuff more than this Young Justice, though.
No, but I know, but what I'm talking about is the stringing along. Like, there was this mystery of why can't they go home, right? And in that, it felt more natural because of timey-wimey stuff and what he did with Eva Bell, creating that character that could freeze time. But it kept, when I was reading that, it kept leading to this, Beast is trying to get them home, but they can't figure it out. Here, the mystery's inverted of what happened to their home, and they don't know if he knows quite yet. You know what I mean? So I don't know, but
out of interest, are you anywhere near like giving up on the book? Just no. With the way that you kind of
no. I mean, I'm still reading it. It's just it feels like this should be a book when it was announced that could have been like amongst the favorites every time it was coming out, and instead it's kind of in this weird murky place. And part of it feels like the editorial side of things where he can't just go and answer a lot of things because it's supposed to be stuff that ties into various other things. So it feels like there's a hindrance on it, and I maybe combine that with being a bit too many characters or whatever, or maybe it's just not as good as his other work, and that's something that it could just be that possible. But it definitely feels like it's hindered by a lot of like, oh well, we can't explain too much of this because this would contradict Rebirth, or we can't explain too much of this because what we're going to do in Death Metal is going to fix a lot of continuity stuff. It feels like a book that exists despite what continuity says is supposed to be going on right now, and the book has still not gotten over the fact that it's trying to still kind of define how it's getting away with it.
What issue are we on now?
This was what 16.
So we're well over a year's worth of issues at this point, and it's still kind of dealing with why the team exists in this continuity.
Yeah, we're still there.
That's who I feel how he picked the team, right? These are all these heroes that haven't been around, So instead of doing his own Teen Titans, he's doing this,
which is fine. But like, I mean, the first arc of this book should have been like why they're all
resolving
here.
these.
Yeah, and instead
and
it was
you
like
can get on to telling stories with them.
But then it was like let's immediately go to Gem World and not address any of it, and like some of that was fun, and I think stuff after that was more fun. But the more I look back at the run in hindsight at this point, I'm kind of like, I feel like it's just been stalling. There's been just lots and lots of stalling.
This is for everyone who says Bendis decompresses way too much.
Yeah.
This sounds like a key example of that.
Well, to me, this is not decompression though. This is just the story's not there yet. Like, I think decompression is very different from what I'm describing here.
Decompression in the sense of we should be at a point already where the team has been explained, but it's being spread out over little drip feed bits here and there over all of this thing. That's decompression in that sense.
I mean, I guess, but I don't even feel like it's decompressing that story. I just feel like it's avoiding it. Up until these last 2 issues, it kind of wasn't even a factor in the book for, like, 2 arcs or something like that.
And then he's stopped to pause to explain all that, and yeah, I don't know. I kind of just want. I understand why they're there, but I just want them moving on doing Young Justice stuff.
Yeah, I feel like instead of being a compelling story that kind of answers and brings together some sort of like good reason why they're all here and where they all came from and remember things, instead it feels like this really long checklist of like, okay, we have to address this. So instead of feeling like a story, it feels like oh, we have to like adhere to all these bullet points. And I guess I'm feeling the wire work a little bit too much instead of just feeling a story that has these elements in it. So I didn't expect to be so negative on this. I mean, ultimately this issue, when I rate it, it's going to be like a 6. It's not terrible.
I have it at a 7. I still enjoyed it, and I love all the art stuff. But again, going in wanting to know like how that last issue left off to this, it was a big letdown.
Yeah.
So,
it feels a bit too fluffy. I want it to feel more important, and it's not getting there. But there's positive qualities. The art's pretty solid. I mean, the only thing I don't like about Godlewski's art is that I think sometimes his mouths are a little bit too, I guess, anime, for lack of a better.
it doesn't bother me. It's, fine by me.
From memory, his mouth's always felt kind of thin.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I think he means by anime.
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically whenever they do sort of emotion where they're kind of like sort of thinking and pressing their lips together. Like,
it's just a one line.
Yeah, or it's like I don't know. When they're in like sort of full talking, it's fine. But whenever they get their mouths closed, it feels a bit iffy. But I guess that's just this ended up being kind of a sprawling conversation of why it's not necessarily as good as it should be, which is a shame.